Good morning and welcome to day 2 of the Ashford University Teaching and Learning Conference. My name is Jerry Ford and I will be your host for this session. It's entitled Objects May Be Closer Than They Appear, Adapting to an Online Audience. Our presenter for this section is Dr. Julie Pal-Agrawal, and we're excited that you've joined us today for this presentation. The chat window will not be open until the end of the session, so please save your questions until that time. Please welcome our presenter.
Hello, everyone. Hi. I'm going to be talking about basically creating an online presence and doing this through both content and cosmetic choices that you can make. So, just to start off with some of the cosmetic choices that we can make, obviously we want to have a well-designed classroom. And it's important, right? Because when we have a well-designed learning space, we have an improvement in student satisfaction, learner outcomes, and retention, basically, right? And it's even more important because in this current climate, right, we have younger students who are coming into our classes. They are bedazzled, perhaps, by many websites and many very sophisticated destinations on the web. So it's important that there are certain well thought out choices that we make when we design an online learning space, right? And as I first talk about some cosmetic choices before talking about content related issues, there's a few considerations, right? One is just basically typeface, right? Is the typeface that you're choosing legible? Simple things like color, right? The use of white space, the choice of image, and consistency, right? And some of these may seem obvious, but they are actually mistakes that sometimes people do. One is having a large size, having clean letters, right? And really choosing wisely what you think will be visible, right? For instance, Arial Black and Times New Roman are both excellent choices that actually studies have shown are very visible and readable in different situations, right? Small things like choosing color wisely, right? Using high contrast combinations, right? Using, knowing things like, men prefer blue, for instance, women prefer green, and that some people can't see the difference between red and green. Right? Again, being generous with white space, right? Again, it might seem obvious, but just seeing the difference of when you use white space, it really makes a readability issue, and why it does, I'm going to talk about in a few minutes, right? Too long didn't read, right? We have all encountered that in our announcements when we create announcements, right? Another small yet obvious thing, right, about having images, right, that reflect perhaps the different students that will come and read your announcements, read a discussion board, opening post, things like that. Okay, and just, being consistent, right? Your classroom shouldn't look like a ransom note, right? So this kind of idea of being consistent with things like fonts, with color, right? Certain types of spacing, right? Making sure that there is some kind of consistency, right? And, here's a small example. Here, the font's too small. There's different colors that may be hard to read. And this isn't for lack of trying. Someone can make this announcement and really put in a lot of effort, but you can see that it isn't always readable, right? It isn't always something that communicates. So, and then the question becomes, right, why are these changes, why are these types of changes needed, right, in the classroom, right? Sorry, just gonna, excuse me, I'm just trying to, I apologize. So why are these types of changes needed, right, in an online teaching atmosphere, right? Why do we care? Why does it make a difference? First of all, this is very interesting, right? It's how people read text online, right? So I give it a few seconds, not even minutes, and then I'm moving again. It's like your eyes are passing over the words where you're not taking in what they say. When I realize what's happening, I have to go back and read again and again, right? This is by Christine Hanscombe, a 35-year-old grad student in creative writing at American University. And she's talking about a way that students are now reading text, right? Which is actually in a very non-linear way. And so this is quite interesting. This is what's called a reading heat map. And it actually has measured, right, how your eye focuses on text, right, when you read it. And if you look at the middle, it's most often what they call an F shape, right? Where basically you start at the left, right? And then you read, and then we skim down a few sentences, and then we start at the left, and then we move at the right, right? So this is how we are reading, right, information. And it tells you, right, if you know something like this as an instructor, it tells you perhaps where to put important information. If you know the students who have been used to reading online, right, who read online information, not just our classes, but our textbooks, right, websites, whatever, that there's a primary area, optical area, right, a strong follow area. Perhaps there's in between information that students absolutely don't read, right? Then going into a weak visual area, right? And then what is called a terminal area. So if you think of the eye as moving in this sort of Z or, it's F kind of pattern, right? Then you could think like, where is the best place perhaps to put information for students who are used to receiving information in an online format, right? Where would be a weaker place, and where would be, obviously the beginning, right? And it looks like the end are the best places to put maybe key information. There's been studies on how do we read in a physical level with a book, right? And how do we see things, right, online, right? So when we read a physical book, right, we see letters as physical objects, right? And we see the page as a physical landscape that we're actually focusing on. And there's something to be said about feeling the weight of a book and physically turning pages, right? And obviously the difference is when we read electronically, right? We often go into a scroll function like I was just describing. We don't interfere. Sometimes we're not navigating the way with the physical book, how we know it's the end of a page. We turn the page. There's sometimes an intuitive navigation because we're just like on another page, but we haven't like turned the page, right? And there is a placelessness, right, that comes from not turning pages. Sometimes the page changes, but it really looks the same because we've actually just maybe gone to the bottom of the screen, for instance. And there are studies, right, that this actually has an effect on how we comprehend information. So for instance, Anne Mangan, a professor from University of Stavanger, she looked at the importance of navigating through text in a physical manner and the influence that it has on reading comprehension, right? And basically students, she found, students who read text on computers perform worse than students who read on paper, right? And it's not supposed to be an alarming study. It's just meant for us to become more aware, right? That, we have students who are now reading these days, we too, I too, right? Read a lot of things online. We are obviously in an online setting, just that reading comprehension there are studies that it is less, right? In an online setting. Another thought that comes up is that we have moved as a society from what's called what's called crystal intelligence, right? And that's when we know actual knowledge, right? And it's like, as simple as when we think like of a phone number, right? Which we used to know. And studies have shown that now we've moved to what's called a more fluid intelligence. And what does that mean? That means that we might not know the phone number or the address. We don't have that in our knowledge base, but we definitely have ways of understanding how we get somewhere, right? We know how to get somewhere. We know how to navigate, find the map, go on Google Maps, right? But we may not remember, right, the actual address. And so these types of intelligences. So now we have moved to a society where we are more into a fluid intelligence. So students are used to scanning things, looking for things. When they read, say, an announcement, or they're looking at something that you're writing, even an email, they're looking to find the information that they need, that they want out of something. And that's completely different than a type of reading where you're reading with no basic desire for a particular outcome always, which is more what was done with, before we were trained to read multiple websites, we're scanning through, multiple documents on the web all the time, and we're looking, we have a fluid intelligence. We're basically looking for particular information the minute we open a website. And that's a different way that students come to things that we write and interact with us. And so just having that knowledge, right, seems like it would be powerful. So the question becomes, right, from looking at a few of these things, right, like, so what can we do, right? What can we do in terms of like helping students, right? And it's simple things, right, like highlighting keywords, right? If we know that, for instance, students look at the beginning, right, they'll look at the end and they'll follow through with the first sentence or first two sentences of what we write, then is it worth, like in the middle area, maybe highlighting subtitles, subheadings, right? Especially like breaking down information into smaller units, since again, we are understanding that they may be skimming, they may be scanning, and it's not so much a sign of weakness or a sign like, they don't care, our students don't care anymore, like they're just, reading for the test or reading for the assignment, but more like that we're all being trained to look for information in these ways. We're all being trained to, this is adapting to a new environment, right? Where we're bombarded with so much information in different places that this is how we read. So if you know that this is how students read, right? Subheadings and subtitles, bulleted lists, right? One main idea or topic per paragraph, and this use of this kind of very famous like inverted pyramid, right? Where basically the most important text is in the beginning, right? And we know that this is how like students will look for something. And this example, right, is one in which on the right side, we have like a way information can be presented, but on the left side, we have what's scannable, right? What's quicker to read, right? And when we look at what's happened to make it quicker to read, right, it's a lot of common sense, but it is also a lot about being aware, right, that we're all changing how we process information, what information we're looking for, and we're reading in a more utilitarian way, right? And because if we do believe studies that comprehension is less than when students read online, it is helping them navigate text to increase fundamental comprehension, right? And so you can see, the small changes that were made with this document, but how much readable it actually is. So the third thing that I wanted to talk about is how do we curate content in an online course to engage students? And so we moved from a cosmetic sort of very easy changes to then kind of looking at why those kinds of changes have become more important than actually just simple cosmetics, right? That people actually read things online in a different way and have different expectations and a different motivation and intent, right? When they may be reading an announcement or a discussion board post, to then looking at really how do we create more engaging content in this current climate of an online world, right? And in order to start that kind of discussion, I thought we'd look at like two metrics of student engagement, right? One is students need to feel that they're dealing with real people and they belong in a larger community, right? That's one metric that tells you that your students are engaged. And students also need to feel that they're sharing more than just facts, that they're somehow involved in sharing, negotiating, arguing things that are meaningful, right? And have different perspectives. So when we talk about how do we engage our students, right? in this online world where they're bombarded with so many different stimuli each day, right? And when they come into our class, right, how do we engage them? I actually, I've been thinking about this quite a bit, and I thought that I would start looking outside of the classroom and think about how web designers, companies that, content marketers, for instance, how do they measure customer engagement, right? And it kind of brings in another viewpoint, another way of thinking like, well, how, as an instructor, how can an instructor also increase student engagement? And so when we look at, let's say, a content writer creating a company website, the way they engage, if customers actually come to the website, is that they have these variables, which is, one is activity time, the total amount of time a user spends online interacting with the website, right? There's visit frequency, right? How often does the customer return, right? And user action, right? So how often does the user perform the action that's asked for the service? So if it was a newspaper website that was asking for an online subscription, they would measure that this website was engaging, right, by the fact that, X number of whatever people, like, say, got a subscription, right? So they have a very clear way of measuring whether or not their website is dynamic, their content is engaging people, and that, their customers, right, are actually interacting. So I thought, like, hey, how about taking this and looking at this as a way to measure, like, student engagement, right? So let's say, right, we wanted to look at, like, for instance, how many hours a student spends, like, in a week on a discussion board, right? Or we wanted to look at how many days, right, a student visits, like, your discussion board, right? On how many days. And then how many times, right, does a student post on the separate, let's say, I teach literature classes. So we usually have 2 discussion board threads, right? So how many times does a student in a given week post on separate discussion board threads, right? And one of the ways, right, that people that have, obviously, content writers, is that they think of engaging material, right? And one way to think about engaging material is using these free resources, actually, which I've started using in my classroom as a way to optimize my discussion board threads. And I mean more the follow-ups. I know a lot of the things are fixed, right, given to us. And I thought I'd just kind of talk about some of these tools and how I use them, because, again, there are ways to curate content, right, in ways that engage our students. And these are all free, and they're all just websites that you can easily, I think you just have to give your email, basically. That's it. And so looking at them, like, for instance, Storify, like, so say you have a topic, and I'll have an example coming up, a topic that, you're going to be speaking about. You can actually get a conversation map, meaning that in the larger world outside of our class, right, how do people talk about this topic? What are the points of interest? What are the issues that come up when this topic is introduced in the larger world on the web? What are kind of the key points, right? Word tracker, like, if you put in a topic, right, it gives you popular keywords, right? So what are people searching for? What are people, when they discuss this, what are the common, like, search terms, right? And I have examples coming up. And then Buzzsumo, right? This is a great website, actually, and it's free. And it talks about, so if you put in a topic, right, let's say you have a discussion board topic that week, it actually gives you the list of the most popular shareable content, right? What was the most shared content on that topic on the web? Right tag is something that gives you the most popular Twitter hashtags. And you can always use Google Analytics. Again, these are all free, they're all available. And that tells you the ways in which the people searched, right, for these topics. And it looks like this, like when you use these tools, as you can see, for instance, right tag gives you the Twitter hashtags. Buzzsumo, which I actually really love, is a simple 1-minute thing that gives you all the most popular shared queries, like the ways in which people tried to access information on a topic, like what did they type in, what were the most popular articles, Storify, which is on the bottom, gives you the, like I said, a conversation map, right? And all these can be useful. And I just wanted to, here's an example, right, of how I have used this like in a classroom. So for instance, in a language and culture class, right? So the question originally that I had as a follow-up, right, is should there be a global language, right? And I actually then went around and I used, just, it didn't take long, just a few minutes. I used those tools and I found that here are the most popular articles, right? And I have them listed above, right? Will Chinese be the next essential global development language? And then I looked up, and then I found some keywords that people use. When they talk about global language, what are actually people asking about? They're actually asking about some very specific things like Mandarin, Esperanto, right? I found some hashtags. And I found, which I actually, this is like so fun, the most popular queries. And that is the questions that people ask when they're searching on this topic, right? So what if English is not the best choice for a global language? Should there be a universal second knowledge? Which version of English should be the official language? Will a global language destroy minor languages? And taking that information, and it really doesn't take very long to actually like quickly type this stuff in, I came with a new discussion board question, and this is a follow-up. Our president says English is our future, but isn't Mandarin? And the hopes is by looking at that middle area, which was actually like gauging what the current popular interest is, what are the topics people are talking about, crafting perhaps a discussion board question, which is a follow-up that may be more engaging, that versus that original, looking at kind of the landscape. And then so when students may be more inclined to actually answer this question because it actually plugs in to the larger conversations in this world, right? And so that is kind of the idea of using these tools, which is becoming more cognizant of what's out there, right? What's in relation to what they're seeing and how you can use these tools to actually create some better content. And I kind of wanted to talk a little about why this happens, right? Oftentimes, right, we do have, like, you know, I mean, some of these here instructions like, oh, students just don't care anymore. They don't read anymore. Like, remember the good old days when we like highlighted our textbook when we were young. And it's really, it's not quite right in that light. Like the vein of this presentation was more actually that we're all going through this, right? We're all having this change in how we intercept with online material. This is not just an a student thing. This is not just like an Ashford student thing. This is all of us, right? We often have to read more in a hurry, right? And we often have to read on screens, which is actually the reason we're even reading on a screen is that it's a time-saving convenience plan. So we're actually entering the process of reading in a different way. We are looking into online, say, education or online reading because of convenience, right? So we are already changing the basic, sometimes assumptions of going into interacting with material. Readers are searching for what's personally relevant to them in their in a certain task, right? Yes, that's true, right? When we're bombarded with so much on the internet, we need to have a plan. If you're just like opening, you know, you go in there, yes, we're going for Google Maps, we want a destination, then we need to get out. We're not just gonna sit there and like read some other things. Like, it's just, I mean, that's really seen as a waste of time. So this kind of more leisurely, perhaps peripheral reading, more inspired reading that perhaps, you know, we can say happen. The internet, the way we read, the way we interact with online reading doesn't really allow for that. That's actually seen as like just web surfing, which is a more passive, inactive, right, measure, right? So, and then readers are searching for what's personally relevant to them or their task, right? So that is true. Readers are also well trained in scanning pages, and this is their preferred reading method, right? And we've kind of discussed, right, why that happens, right? How we've evolved that way. And so all this is a way to sort of think about our own writing, our own framing that happens in the classroom, our own ways of kind of, even our own attitudes, honestly, to having to maybe like, you know, say something again or rewrite something again or present something visually in a different way is not just like, hey, you know, we have to accommodate, right, these students, but instead like, hey, we all have to accommodate, all of us, to this new type of reading, this new content. And we all need to kind of become more receptive to changing certain things to, like, you know, have, right, a better dialogue. So that's really, you know, what I wanted to kind of end with.